Hi, everyone. This is Trish Kendall, your host for the Choose and Become interview series. I made 5 critical choices on my journey from the pit of despair to the peak of success, to enduring success. I picked up the phone, which was a first choice. I committed to a two-way agreement. I built trust in myself and inspired the trust of others. I created community and belonging, and I chose to embrace my boundless capacity to love. In this interview series, I ask people who I admire to come and join us and share a little bit of their wisdom and insight and lessons as it relates to these 5 choices across their lives on their journey to enduring success. And today I'm so happy to have Brad. Brad Nations is my guest today. So I have to say, Brad and I go way back.
Yeah.
We go way back, and we created a professionally fulfilling relationship together, which then transformed into a personal relationship, which made me feel incredible that I got to experience all of you, and the success that you have created in your life. So will you just start out for a few minutes, and will you just tell our audience a little bit about you and what you want to share?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So first off, just thank you so much for having me. And I'm just so proud of you, just as my friend, for what you created here. It's inspirational. I've drawn a lot of strength and wisdom from the previous guests, and just really honored to you would even think of me in this way. So yeah, my name's Brad Nations. Just by way of background, where to start? It's so funny. Your first reaction is to start professionally, right?
Yeah, totally.
But we're all so much more than that. But yeah, born and raised in Austin, Texas. High school in San Antonio, college, a little town in between called San Marcos, at the university called Texas State, and really was raised mostly by a single mom. Had my dad was certainly around, but a long way away. They divorced when I was about 5 years old, and saw him periodically throughout my youth. But really was lucky enough to have a really strong mom, which there'll be a theme here later as we go along with really being inspired by strong women. And yeah, really just was very lucky. I met my wife at a very young age, at 20, in college. We're still together, almost 30 years total together, about 27 married. We'll talk about some of the ups and downs of that probably today. That might come up. And 2 great kids, grown kids, which is bizarre to me that I'm old enough to have grown kids. But one that's 22, lives out in Seattle, and is out of college and launched, and another one's a senior at Oklahoma State. Go Pokes! And she graduates in the spring. So beyond that, on the professional side, really I've been really fortunate. I spent the first half of my career in operations, and that's actually how I met you.
Yeah.
I was running and building call centers is what I did across insurance and telecom. And I got this call one day to join a healthcare startup with no idea what that even meant. And by the way, it was in Utah, and I was living in Dallas. So very odd set of circumstances, but I took a bit of a flyer, and it really launched what ended up being my career of note in the health tech or health technology space. And moved out to Salt Lake City with my family, where we spent about 10 years. And from there, just worked through a variety of, or really stayed in that organization for a long stretch. I'll talk through some of this as we go today. But and just have been with a variety of different health tech organizations like Castlight Health and Consumer Medical. And today I work for just an incredibly important organization called FOLX Health, which is in support of the LGBTQ plus community. And, that really leads into my personal interests. I'm a very, very strong advocate and ally for the community themselves, but also spend a lot of time working at my old university, sitting on boards. I raised a lot of money for the MS Society on my bike, and I'm a big art nerd and film nerd and music nerd. So all that is kind of a through line, but yeah, that's me.
It's so awesome. And you are very humble when it comes to even just thinking about your professional career and your professional success. And I know because I was a part of some, and I watched you from a distance with some of the other, and it's very inspiring. Yeah. We each have our own definition of ultimate success. And what I'd like to know is, when you think about creating enduring success, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I tell you, it's evolved, right, as we get older, like most things do. But I think I've settled on it for me over the last 10 or 15 years. And enduring success to me is doing your best to set aside the fear, the fear of an unknown future, right? And
Mm.
it's way easier said than done. So I will not come on here today and say I figured this thing out and I sleep soundly every night and everything's unicorns and rainbows. But nothing ever turns out the way that we think it's going to, and we spend hours and days and years and months cycling through these scenarios in our head, and they never come true, right? So I think people that find enduring success are ones that can find a way to set that aside and really then be able to chase what's true to them, whether that's through their family, through causes they believe in, performing meaningful work. I do believe we're on this planet to produce and to do something meaningful, but to try to do so in a manner that is not dictated by the fear of the future. So you'll hear kind of as we tell my story, I've tried to adopt that philosophy over the last 10 or 15 years, and I've been really lucky so far. But it's way easier said than done. The future is a scary thing. And I think we are also wired to worry and to fret and to be
Totally.
nervous. And those things are still very present in my life. But I know for me, I view it that way. And the people that I view as successful are the ones that are able to set those things aside and really chase what they believe in.
So let's go with that when we're thinking about change. The first critical choice I made on my journey was to pick up the phone when my sister called. And that was a first choice. I think we all make first choices, whether they're practical or profound. And what is a first choice that you made when you reflect back that helped fuel your enduring success?
Yeah, I tell you, it was pretty clear to me when I thought about this. It was in 2015, and I made in hindsight, what feels kind of like a crazy decision, but it really kind of falls into this philosophy that I've shared. We had just the organization I was working with from 2007 all the way to 2015. We had gone through. You were part of it. That's where we had met. We'd gone through a very early stage startup. We worked our tails off. We were bought by a bigger company. I stayed there for 3 years and just hit a point to where I didn't feel like professionally I was achieving very much, and certainly wasn't feeling good about my work every day. No knock on that organization, but it just, I hit that point that I mentioned. Maybe I was sticking around for fear of the future, sticking around for fear of being able to feed my family, and all the reasons which are valid. But I took a leap of faith. And this is the first time I've ever done anything like this before in my life. I quit my job with no plan, no backup, and no desire to seek something else immediately. So I would label it as a sabbatical. And that choice in itself, first of all, could not have been accomplished without my incredible partner, my wife, right? And I still remember exactly where we were walking in Salt Lake City, exactly the conversation we had when I said, how would you feel if I walked away from this thing without a plan? And she did not hesitate. Do whatever's in your heart. And so I'm very fortunate, first off, to have a partner that supported me that way. But that decision really changed my entire life. I left, as I mentioned, without a plan. My number one goal at that point was, it was the last summer of my kids' lives that I had full control of their schedules. So before boyfriends and girlfriends started coming in, before cars and jobs. So I knew I wanted to spend dedicated time with them, and we did. We spent almost a month in California. We have an old trailer that we drag around. We started at the top of California, worked our way down. I spent a lot of time traveling with not only with old friends and catching up. I also spent some time traveling by myself.
Wow.
And that ended up being hugely impactful for me. I'm very much wired to be around people. I get my energy from people, but I forced myself to be alone. And I dragged my trailer up to the tops of the mountains in Utah and Wyoming and Montana, and I sat there with myself in silence, which, again, if you know me, is my worst nightmare. And what I did in that time was reflect, and I wrote to myself, which, again, maybe the beginnings of The Shining, I'm not sure, but it's, in the end, I wrote to myself and just reminded myself what was important. I got far enough away from checking emails every day, text messages, phone calls, to where I just was getting up every day and living my life without all these other noise. And as hokey as it might sound, there was clarity there. I was reminded about what I love and what I care about, what I want to do professionally. And I wrote to myself to remind myself of that as my journey kicked back off. And I spent almost a year doing this, and chase some passions. I worked for the Sundance Film Festival, which as I mentioned earlier, a total film nerd.
But I didn't know you did that.
Yeah, I did. I worked for the Sundance Institute for about 4 months, and
Wow.
ended up literally living in Park City during the festival, and got to meet some amazing people. Have some experiences which are just insane. And my number one goal, I'll tell you though, was to wait until I was so miserable that I couldn't wait to get back to work,
Hmm.
until my tank was completely full of energy and ready to roll. And then I took those lessons that I taught myself, and then I went out and sought my next opportunity. And I'll pause there. But that was probably the biggest thing that ever happened to me on that side, at least in my professional career, and frankly even my personal, because it kind of realigned how I view the world.
And interesting, I hear two big first choices in
Hmm.
that. The first choice of leaving the job without a plan, right? Like that's huge. That's a big choice in and of itself. And I'm sure you could even break that down to like little small ones before you made the big one. But the
Sure.
second first choice you made there is how you were going to spend your time.
Hmm.
Right, because I'm sure we know people who have left and transitioned from perhaps one career to the next and then just dive right back in. I think it's pretty interesting and astounding that another first choice you made was I'm going to use my time with my family and with myself to create clarity and reflection, and my body and my mind will tell me when I'm ready to take the
Hmm.
next gig. First choices are hard to make.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, you tell that story and it's like when you've made the choice, is it really that hard?
Yep. Yeah. It was like the choice. The choice itself is easy. The consequences. And you're back to fear of the unknown future, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's it. Like, you think about what makes a first choice difficult. The emotional side of that was a no brainer. I mean, I wanted to do that so badly. I was yearning to do that piece, but there's a very pragmatic side, right? How will I feed my
For
family?
sure.
And I think professionally, like, it's how will I be viewed, right? I think
Mm.
we're all kind of wired, and this is really important. If anyone is inspired by this little part of the story, I would tell you to listen closely to hear what happens next. We're all wired to believe that, boy, there's a gap in your resume. What's wrong with that guy? Did he get fired? Why does no one want to hire him?
Mhm.
And I think we are told that, or we believe that. And I am here to tell you the exact opposite of that is true. It was when I was ready to come back into the workforce to this day. I mean, we're 7, 8 years removed from that moment. That story is the most inspirational thing I can tell anybody in any job interview, in any discussion, because every time it's like, oh boy, I wish I'd done that. And I remind them, you can. Like, there's nothing stopping you.
Totally.
Now, I'm not saying these are easy decisions. I'm not saying that there's not, that I had worked hard and had the privilege of being able to afford to do this in some capacity, right? It wasn't going to be forever. Like, we had to pay attention to bills and money. But even if somebody's not able to afford it today, it doesn't mean you can't put it on the roadmap. It's a goal. It's
Totally.
5 years from now, 4 years from now. And so I think from that side, I would just allay anyone's fears. Back to the fear of the future is, how you're viewed, and that choice is not going to be a negative one at all, because you're going to come out bigger, stronger, faster because of it. And so, but it was not without risk, and
Yeah.
certainly I could have done something to where maybe there was a universe where I didn't have an interesting job opportunity come up, or I could have lost my house or had other types of challenges, and but was very fortunate that everything kind of worked out the way it did.
Great. The second
Mm.
critical choice that I made on my journey was to commit to a two-way agreement. And now the agreement that I committed to was between me and my sister.
Right.
When I think about two-way agreements, the characteristics that I think about are two parties coming together with the intent of giving and receiving, both giving and receiving, in order to achieve a desired outcome. What I experienced is by committing to this two-way agreement with my sister, actions that started out from, I have to do this, really transformed to I want to do
Mm.
this. I think we all informally and formally kind of enter into these two-way agreements, but I'm curious from your perspective, what is a two-way agreement that you've entered into? What did you give and what did you get?
Boy, it's it. That's a great question. For me, it's probably back to my wife. I mentioned earlier, we met when we were 20, and if you think about that, I mean, I'm almost 50 now, and so it's a long time, right? And through those decades, people, no matter how committed they are to one another, you grow and you change as an individual, and as a couple. And what I found, what we found was as we were getting older and our kids were getting older, and all about the same time frame, by the way, that I just got done telling you about.
Right.
Um, what we both started to realize is we had become very different people, and that while we loved each other and we were committed to each other, and of course we had our kids and the life we built together, our interests had fundamentally changed. I love live music. That is not her jam. I love going to movies, not her thing. She was seeking a spiritual path,
Hmm.
not my thing. Well, and I may mention some of that again here in a bit, but just a lot of things were changing, right? And our relationship was not great at all. I'm not talking out of school. If she were here in the house, she would be nodding behind me. So we made a two-way agreement to figure it out one way or the other. My biggest fear, as pragmatic as it sounds, is our kids were going to graduate, leave the house. We were going to shake hands and say, that was real good. Good luck with the next chapter of your life. And neither of us wanted that, but both of us saw that that was a possibility. It really was. We'd seen a lot of friends of ours that had divorced, and as painful as that was, we also saw a lot of friends of ours who had found a partner who was an incredibly wonderful fit for who they are now as an adult, maybe not who they were 20 years ago. So it wasn't, in like the way my mind started to go, it wasn't necessarily all negative, but I wanted to be married to my wife and I wanted to stay with her. And so we fought and we went to counseling and we worked through stuff and we learned a lot about each other. And the two-way agreement we made was we wanted to make this thing work or at least go down swinging in a good way. And we were so fortunate that we accomplished that goal, in that we found a way to reconnect as a couple. We found things that are common ground to us without having to give in to something you just don't care about. My wife still does not care about going to live music, and
She's
that's
not
okay.
going. She's not going to the blues festival or whatever you go to.
So for me, I would spin that in my brain like she doesn't love me, that's why she doesn't want to go. No, the truth is she just doesn't care about going to live music. And so we found a way to find a number of joint interests, and we also gave each other permission and the security to have individual interests. And that was actually all during that same time. That was one of the things we worked on together while I was on my sabbatical, and we're lucky that we came out the other side of that. But without the two of us making that commitment to each other and at least trying, knowing that there was a decent chance this wasn't going to end well, is probably the best thing I've ever done in my life. And I can say with all honesty, and I'll say it here on video, we are as good now as we were when we were 20 or 21 when we first met. And that's hard to replicate, right? So those are pretty awesome. Those first couple of years are pretty great. and so,
Right.
so we're lucky on that side, but it took a lot of work and a lot of knowing that it may not go the direction we think it will. Again, fear of the unknown future, right?
Did your kids observe this resetting or this new two-way agreement? Like, did they observe a change in the two of you, do you think?
Boy, I'd love for them to answer that question. We talked about it a little bit with them. My wife and I are very open and honest with our kids, especially now that they're adults and they're in relationships of their own, right? My eldest is engaged. My youngest is in a long-term relationship. And I do think it's been important for us to be very honest with them because I think in their mind, we've had a pretty great relationship. They certainly haven't seen the ups and downs, and using it as a teaching moment for your kids that no matter how wonderful things are, it's going to be hard. Marriage is hard. Two people together forever is a very difficult thing. And it's not always great. And that's okay. So I know they do now because we've exposed all of that to them. Again, with hopes that they strengthen their own relationship. And I'll tell you the one thing I have shared with them is seek counseling early and often.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I liken it. I remember talking to my nephew one day. We were going through a pretty terrible family tragedy, and I likened a cycling analogy. You can see over my shoulder, I'm a cyclist, and I told him, I said, when I'm on the bike, the point is, eat before you're hungry, drink before you're thirsty. right? And I think in the end, that's what cycling's all about. If you wait until you're thirsty or hungry, you're going to bonk out and you're going to be done for the day. And I believe that too with seeking help, working on your mental health, behavioral health, and eat before you're hungry, drink before you're thirsty, right? And especially in relationships, like begin to kind of seek this thing so a little issue stays a little issue. Otherwise, you end up with Patty and I did, where suddenly we've diverged way too far. We let it get away from us.
So great. So the third critical choice that I made was to build trust in myself and inspire the trust of others. And building trust in myself was truly the first thing that I had to do before I could even think about how can I inspire the trust of others. Sometimes I think this is a difficult question to think about. Was there ever a time where you felt like you might not have trusted yourself, like had the full trust in yourself? And if so, how did you build it?
Yeah, I mean, daily to this day, I have to. I mean, like it's funny. I can kind of break the question down. Like I trust myself to make good day to day decisions, and I'm not. Luckily, I'm not being drawn into anything that's going to be terribly life altering. But what I don't trust myself sometimes is really, to use an old tired term, but imposter syndrome. Like I still to this day struggle with that. And I struggle with, why on earth is anyone paying me to do anything? Why did Trish Kendall ask me to join this interview series? And, and it's funny because, pragmatically, you can look at the body of work and you can look at the impact you have on your friends and your family relationships. And you can take all that and know that you're okay and you're doing something that's positive, but there's still an inner voice for me that erodes trust and kind of, just kind of tears away at things. So, and it's funny, I'm not even saying it's all bad. Like in some ways it continues to push me forward, but in other ways it is a detractor. I remember years ago, I was, when I was at Castlight Health, I was really fortunate. I had a really good year and we were kind of on our club trip, right? Where you get to go and they take the kind of top performers, and only time in my life I ever got to go on that trip. And I was talking with one of our senior executives and I made a similar comment to her. I was like, yeah, I just, I half the time I don't feel like I even know what I'm doing. and I just come off the biggest sales year in the history of the company. I had sold the biggest deal ever to this day in the history of the company. And she's like, what? It blew her mind, but it was the God's honest truth. So I feel like for me, the trust has been challenging, but I will say the leap that I took in 2015 and, the decisions that I've made along the way have really begun to build that to where at least I do know, pragmatically, yeah, I can trust myself. I can trust the impact I have on people. I can trust the work that I do. But there is still a voice in my head every day, and I wish it would go away, but it doesn't seem like it's moving, that just continues to kind of just grab at you and say, nope, you're a big fraud, and they're going to all figure it out here pretty quick.
And maybe that's part of the Brad magic. You know how sometimes they say like, just whatever, who you are is who you are, and that's what you create. And maybe it goes even back to what I said at the beginning, is that you are very humble and it's authentic, like what you were just saying. You're like, hey, wait a minute, I created this. Yeah, you created this. How does someone inspire your trust?
Boy, that's pretty easy, right? To me, it's just honesty and positivity. And at least for me, they're just kind of unyielding desire to see other people do well. As I think about like the way I try to serve in my life today is I love being a connector. I love being a voice. I love being a thought partner. And, I've learned that, if I'm asked for advice, I'll give it, but otherwise just listening and helping ask questions and helping people think through things. And so I'm really inspired by that. And that builds trust for me when I feel like somebody is really genuinely interested in me and how things are going. And it's not just the cursory, how you doing? How's the weather? Okay, let's get to business. But it's really a thoughtful conversation. It makes me feel loved. It makes me feel accepted. And so I try to pass that forward on a regular basis. I'm lucky that I've got a group of people that I get to interact with that sometimes seek my counsel. I seek theirs. And these are all two-way streets, right? You talk about like a mentor relationship. Anyone that I mentor, there are definitely chapters where they're mentoring me. This is a very circular life we're living here. And so I think trust for me really comes down to just, honesty, positivity, and just truly caring about the person that's across from you. Yeah.
One of the things that I think about, I'll put this in, I'm projecting it to you, but this was my experience, is part of the way that I built trust was by doing the little things great.
Oh yeah.
And just because it just seemed so big to me. And so just doing some of the little things great. And I know that you are so disciplined in your work practice and in your biking practice and all. Is there a little thing that you think about, like the little thing that you continuously do great?
I think I've never thought about it that way, but I think the one thing I like to think that I do great is I always say yes when people reach out, when people need time.
Mm,
I never put it off. Hey, Brad, can we talk? Let's talk today. Like, I think it's important that you respond to those things and you get on it right then and there. And I'm guilty as anybody of procrastinating other things. And I wish I was more disciplined in other parts of my life. But when it comes to the people side of things, I'll drop everything to go handle that. And it's just, I think that's probably a little thing that I try to do that I'm really proud of.
yeah. And I'm a recipient of that. Thank you
Uh,
very much. When I was in my early 30s, so this was before you and I met, but when I was in my early 30s, I realized that I was friendly with everyone. I was friends with no one. I
oh
still
boy.
didn't belong anywhere. I still didn't have a community, and I didn't have a sense of belonging. So the fourth critical choice I made at that point was to create community and create
Mm,
belonging, because I figured out you can't get it unless you give it.
yeah, yeah, that's right.
Has there been a time where you ever felt like you didn't well, how about this? You've already given me some examples, but let's just keep going with it. When you haven't felt like you belong.
Yeah, boy, this is a big theme for me. Like, so I would say most of my life, I have not felt like I belonged. I felt like I could get along, um, but I didn't never felt like I truly was connecting well. It's everything from I was never one that really got along with the guys. I was raised by a single mom, had a sister in the house. I was never kind of that rough and tumble boy, and that continues to translate to this day. I struggle with some of those things. In professional settings, there's always someone went to a better school than me that seems a little smarter, a little quicker, a little funnier, a little more insightful. I continue to struggle with that piece. But I'll tell you something that really hit me on my sabbatical. So forgive me, this is going to be kind of a ridiculous story,
Mm-hmm.
but if I rewind the tape all the way back to about like sixth or seventh grade, right? So same kind of thing. I was in school, I knew people, but I was never popular even way after this story. But definitely just had a hard time connecting. Although I was social, people would describe me as, I think some people would be surprised to hear this part if they know me, but what I learned was I was nervous and kind of anxious around people. I was trying to kind of fill a role. But then when I would go to summer camp, so I used to go to summer camp in the hill country here in Texas, and I had friends and I had girls that were interested in me, and I was a totally different person. And then I went back to school and I kind of clammed back up again and became this other version of myself. So I jokingly now call it summer camp Brad. And so when I went to college, I decided I was going to be summer camp Brad. And I was able to develop some really meaningful relationships. I met my wife, but what I found is it's always coming and going. I feel like through much of my professional career, summer camp Brad went away, and I went back to just kind of being this person. And you said it perfectly. I was very, very friendly with lots of people, did lots of things, but I did not really have friends. I didn't make friends in the workplace. I kind of kept everybody at arm's length. And it wasn't until my sabbatical, and one of the things I wrote to myself in that trailer up in the mountains by myself was, be summer camp Brad as best as you can. And so because of that, I will tell you, and again, this is not, it ebbs and flows like everything else in life, but professionally, when I joined Consumer Medical, where I was for 4 years, that is the first time I ever truly put myself out there, and said, okay, I'm going to connect. I'm going to be me. I'm going to accept them and and it ended up being, and for those whoever ends up listening to this, but it ended up being the best experience of my life professionally. I've made
Mm,
friends there that I'll have forever. We haven't been working together for over a year. We're still on a text exchange that gets used every single day.
that's
And that
great.
was the first time I truly felt accepted. I felt connected and very, very close with people that I worked with. And it really changed my perspective. And so I try to adhere to summer camp Brad as much as I can, but
So
it's
good.
not always easy. Yeah.
It's so good. So I've got to pull this a little bit with summer camp Brad. I want to do a compare and contrast. Just some of the adjectives or whatever words that come to your mind when you. What did it feel like not to belong? So when you weren't summer camp Brad, what did that feel like? And then I'm going to ask you, what does it feel like when you chose to be?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I would make a t-shirt called Summer Camp
I
Brad.
know. I think it's awesome.
I've said it more in the last 5 minutes than I have my entire life. So, what does it feel like not to belong? Full of self doubt, second guessing, being in a meeting and saying something and thinking in your brain, "Oh, no one cares about that. That's a bad idea." You know, being invited to things, but secretly thinking, "They don't really want me there. All right, I don't want to do that," or "I think I'm just going to go home." And it's just self sabotage in so many ways, right? It's like I manufactured a scenario in my head and I acted on it, even though it wasn't necessarily true. And I don't, I mean, there's always gonna be people that don't like you and that sometimes what you're perceiving is accurate. But I think most of the time in my life, I've manufactured most of it in my head. And so the opposite of that is when it's summer camp Brad time.
Yeah.
I worry less about that. I am who I am. I make the joke I want to make. I'm not afraid to be confident with what I believe in and stand up for it or back it up or recognize I might be wrong. And so I think when I'm at my best, I care, but I don't spend a lot of time worrying about how this comment might be perceived, or how someone might view me. Because if I'm authentic and I am who I am, this is the best I can be, right? And I find that when I do that, I do feel connected to people. I am much better received, and frankly,
Mm,
that's when my career and my personal life has really gone through the roof. Is when I've done that. It's when I shell up and I clam up again, is when things start slowing down, and then and it just doesn't feel great. It just doesn't feel great.
thank you for that. And the last thing that came to my mind listening to you is that, and this has been my experience too, is that creating a sense of belonging really takes two. Your
Mm-hmm.
desire to show up in a way that you're creating your belonging. And of course, then the other people or the other person embracing,
Yeah.
embracing the way that you're showing up. And so I just think that that story hits that so well. The other
And
thing here is
when I add
community. Oh, go on.
sorry, I think one last point I want to make on
Yeah.
that though is one last learning I've had. This took me a long time. Is just because I'm not accepted, or just because because if someone legitimately is not connecting, I have had to give myself grace and understanding that it's not a zero sum game. It's not like they've just said, I don't like Brad, I'm not going to connect with him. I've learned that people have so many things going on in their lives, so many other things that are challenging them daily. So I've tried to learn also not to take that personally, right? In the end, that and
Great.
maybe it does have to do with me, but likely there's a million other reasons why it's not working out. So trying not to fret on that and move forward. So anyway,
That's
apologies for
awesome.
interrupting you, but
No, that's great. And then the last thing that I wanted to get your perspective on here with the fourth choice is community, and you're a part of many communities. When I think about you, even like your indie films. But what are some of the communities that you're a part of? And you know, again, like what do you get and what do you give? Just like being a part of those communities.
yeah, boy, it's I am a part of a lot of communities, and I love the question because you don't think about that until you take a step back. So yeah, from a community perspective, today it's cycling is a big part of my world. I play guitar. Been playing in bands, and so that's a part of my world. There's a professional community. There's a charitable community. We're trying to do more and more philanthropy. My wife and I just set up an endowed scholarship in our university. We're doing board work, and so there's a lot of those. And I would tell you that the biggest gift that I've gotten from that is really just understanding the perspectives of people that I likely would
Mm,
never have encountered if I had just stayed in my little lane. And so two quick examples in that
yeah.
is, one is the bike. The bike puts me in a group of people from a wildly different set of professional backgrounds, political backgrounds, religious backgrounds, people that I likely would have never even encountered in any other capacity. But suddenly you're in a group of 5 or 6 people riding, and you're getting to know people, and it forces you, and you're on the bike for hours, and you're talking about everything, and you find that you kind of blow past all the stereotypes and all the preconceived notions, and you just get to know the person. Boy, what a lesson, especially in today's world, right? It's just because we don't agree on who should be president or who, whatever, this policy, that policy, to push through some of those things has been amazing. And the last, just real quick example, and probably the greatest thing that's happened to me in my adult life when it comes to community is the church. I mentioned earlier, I'm not a religious person. But when my wife decided, we lived in Utah, that she wanted to really become or really seek out that part of her life, I went. I went to be supportive of her. I went even seeking for me. I was really hoping I could find a connection to that. And I went all in. I met the most amazing people. That's how I got into music. I started playing in a band, and then that led to another band that led to us recording. We're on iTunes, and all that started from that particular, from me saying,
Wow.
I'm going to join this community, even though I don't believe. And I had some negativity and preconceived notions about the people that did believe, and got to know and spend years of my life with one person in particular, the wife of the pastor of the church, and they're some of our closest friends now. But she and I got to know each other at an incredibly deep level, and she's an incredibly faithful woman, and I can't find my way with that. And yet we spent years of our lives just loving each other, being supportive of each other, and hearing each other's perspectives and debating and talking. And it gave me an incredible perspective on her and on faith. And even though I can't personally connect to it, and for her, it gave her an incredible perspective. She's never really had such deep discussions about with someone like me. And here's the most amazing thing, Trish. This is something I never could imagine would happen to me. She wrote a book, and she dedicated the book to me. And because of the spirit of our conversations and the book's not about me, but it is about, in some ways, the conversations, but two people that are very different came together and actually found common ground and learned from each other. And so that's what the community has given to me. So I would say anyone that's hiding from community or staying away from it, holy cow, I owe my entire life to community and the variance of people that are in my life. I'm so fortunate on that side.
And how the differences, because community isn't just people who are like me. I mean, your story just amplifies that so much about how can other people who aren't like me help elevate and nurture and enrich in my life. And that example is, what's her book?
Her book is called The Failure of God.
Okay.
It's on Amazon. Susie Nelson. Go buy it.
Susie Nelson. I'm going to look. I'm totally going to look. All right. That's great.
When you see the inscription, it says to JB, and those are my initials, and she calls me God's best friend. It's pretty. It was incredible. It's one of the most humbling. I've never been so floored. I was truly speechless. And again, you know me pretty good. That's tough for me to be speechless. I didn't know what to say. Just incredibly generous, and the book is beautifully written. So, but anyway,
wonderful.
I digress.
Thank you, Susie. This probably leads us beautifully to my fifth choice. And if I'll just take a quick step back. The 4 choices that we just talked about. So the 4 choices: making a first choice, committing to a 2-way agreement, building trust, and creating community and belonging. Those 4 choices for me built upon each other and prepared me for my 5th choice. For me, it was linear. I had to make those other choices until I was ready and prepared to make the most important choice. I think the choice we all can make to create enduring success, and that is to embrace our boundless capacity to give love and to receive love.
Yeah.
So I want to get into this with you.
Okay, let's do it.
And maybe we just start with, we all have a choice. When I think about love, what I'm not talking about is love as an emotion, love the emotion, when we had kids, we didn't need to choose to love them. They were just, the emotion was there. That wasn't a choice. So I'm talking about the choice to give love and to receive love in the way that it manifests itself and for different people in different ways at different times. Would you share a story or tell us what it means to you to choose to give all of your love?
Yeah, well, sorry. Had I can probably give you two, but it's a recurring theme. But probably the easier one for me to tell out loud. Through that community I mentioned earlier, back in Salt Lake City, got to know a good friend of mine, and Chris. And Chris was here, just happened to be in Texas. I live in San Antonio now. He was in Austin with his wife and some friends, and we were not part of that trip. I was actually out of town. And his wife had an accident while they're on this trip, just a weekend trip, having fun. They're on one of those scooters that you see everywhere. She went down and ended up with a traumatic brain injury. Wasn't sure she was going to survive. And his entire life changed in that exact moment on a Saturday night when everything's just going, like it should. So I flew home, got to Austin to go just support him. But the one thing I did that I'm really proud of, and I had a hard time telling this story because I don't want it to be a bragging thing for me, but it is a time that I chose to give all my love and my heart, my soul to somebody. I found us a place to live. Thankfully, one of my best friends from high school, had an extra space we could stay in, and I moved to Austin with Chris, and I lived there for about 2.5, 3 weeks. I slept on a couch. I took him to and from the hospital every single day. She was in a coma for a good period of time at the beginning, and then began to come out. When they finally were able to at least get her to the next stage, which is rehab, she couldn't go back to Utah. We moved him here to my home, to San Antonio. We put her in rehab in San Antonio. He lived with us. And this all told ended up being about a month of our time. And so, for me to give, yes, but giving love is, I was fortunate enough, again, back to an incredible partner with Patty, and, where I could set my life aside and just support him and love him. And it was everything from driving to and from, taking him to dinner, and just trying to keep him laughing and thinking and talking and crying with him, and agreeing that this is terrible and all this sucks. And it's, and trying to not go down the rabbit hole of the future, and so that was something I'm really proud of. Unfortunately, we had another situation a year later where my nephew passed away unexpectedly, and I ended up doing the exact same thing for my sister, my brother-in-law. And so, while it's awful that these situations have happened, I would tell you the only silver lining is, you said it beautifully. Like, it's, there's no cap on the love and the support we can give. And I found that for whatever reason, that is a gift I can give of just presence and service, and giving and hanging my life up, and not just saying, boy, I hope everything turns out okay, I'll come visit you on the weekend, but going all in and being in it, and being in the toughest, hardest, most emotional times. It's awful. But and the flip side is, I was able to give something that no one else could have given. And the love I received back and continue to, I can see every day in the eyes of my family and my friend Chris of what it meant to them. And I just know my time's coming, right? I'm going to have that moment where I need that love and support. And I'm really proud of the fact that I was able to pour myself into them that way. Yeah.
And Chris and your sister and brother-in-law chose to receive all of your love. And sometimes I think we don't.
That's true.
Choose to receive it all. And Chris did. If we just keep with Chris for a minute. And I think that is powerful, because it allowed you to give it all and feel him receiving.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, keep going.
No, it's just true. Because I just think through the moments when they were here, before we finally were able to get her stable and get back to Utah. And by the way, she might hear this, Suzanne's kicking butt, but she's doing great. But I do remember a really emotional time, as they were leaving, and he just kind of broke down of just thanking me for everything that I did and Patty did along the way. And it was he had an interesting observation that on the surface, I think I made something like a comment like, you would do it for me. And he said something really powerful and what he said was, I'm not sure that I would have. And he started bawling, crying. And I thought about that for a long time. And what he meant was, of course he would. But when you think about it in a rational, pragmatic way, you're like, am I really going to hang up my whole life for 2 or 3 weeks and move in with somebody, do all this? But when the moment hits you and someone you love is in trouble, yeah, that's exactly what you're going to do. And that's exactly what he would do for me. And I did it for him. But it was just an interesting moment probably for both of us, but he would do that. But when you think about it at a rational level, it probably sounds nuts, but it's what you do. It's what people that love each other should do. And it's changed my perspective on empathy and just being present and being there for somebody. And honestly, most of the time was just sitting there going, yeah, this is terrible. It's not a bunch of yeah, buts, or Brene Brown's got a great line about, don't ever lead with at least, that one, I love it.
That's
Well,
great.
at least you have insurance and you can cover it. Like, no, this is just all terrible. I mean, let's
Yeah.
just sit in it and love on each other. And so anyway, I'll pause there.
And I also believe that those actions of love, the behavior of giving love that you just articulated, we can do in the smallest of moments. And
Mm,
perhaps those are the times where it's harder to do because it's not the big moment and knowing that your best friend needs this support and this love and this care. And I hope and I would ask people to consider that even in the small moments, to choose to give love through all of the examples that you gave can not only transform the person that you're giving it to, but more so transform you yourself
yeah.
in the giving.
Think about the small thing. It's funny. I think I make some of my friends uncomfortable because I just started telling my friends I love them, and I put it in the I had a friend of mine whose mother passed away today, and I just texted her. I said, "Hey, I love you. I'm so glad you're in my life." And it's
Mm,
interesting that some people react right away. I love you too, and some people just, "Hey, thanks," but I'm not going to stop. Like I think people need to know that,
yeah.
and it's cliche, but you never want to look back and not have said something that's important to you. And so, it is little moments like that. You're exactly right. Just a little text here or there, just saying it out loud. And it's hard to say out loud
Totally.
sometimes. But strangely, it's harder to say out loud sometimes to like your spouse than it is to some friend. Like it's like we're wired in such weird ways that it's hard to verbalize it, but it's
Yeah.
important to do
And
so.
we can act it out. I mean, you brought up examples and then I'll move us forward, but you brought up examples when we were talking about building trust. Like a manifestation of giving love, I think, is asking questions and listening. Like all of those things in the totality are manifestations of us choosing to give and choosing to receive. And I'll leave our audience with this ponder, this ponder for you and I is I know there are many reasons why we choose to withhold love. And I know there are many reasons why we choose to not receive all the love that others want to give us, whether it's fear or it's pride or all of the things, fear being probably the biggest one. And what I ponder is what if each of us today showed up in the spirit in our next interaction with all of the interactions that we have today with our fellow human beings, just show up in the spirit of, I'm going to give you all the love all of it, and I'm going to receive all that you want to give me. Like, what could that mean?
Unbelievable, right? For me, I tell you that what it means for me is, and I kind of liken back to the story I told about the bike and the people that I met is, what it means is relationship and community building way beyond your predefined religious or political or societal or regional situation. It's just being honest and being forthright and being caring and empathetic, and imagine the expansion of your community at that moment with people that you never in your life dreamt that would be part of your life, and they bring such unique perspective and gifts to you that a story for another interview. But the people that I met, stories I told today, are all folks that I would not have met had I not made a choice that I was going to insert myself into communities and receive and give love. And it's in through ups and downs, it has been the greatest gift. But I think in the world today, if we could show love and therefore show honesty and show understanding and empathy, we actually might all enjoy hanging out together
Exactly.
on every little thing. So, but
Exactly. You are so awesome. I believe with my whole heart, that we create enduring success and we fuel the success of those around us when we do choose. when we choose to give all of our love and we choose to receive it. And your stories and your examples just bring all of that to life. Thank you for choosing to give me you and your time and sharing these amazing stories with our communities.
Well, thanks for creating all this. This is an incredible platform. I'm so lucky to have known you. Yeah, thank you.
You're so awesome.
All right. Love you.
I love you. See, that's perfect. Thank you for joining me for our Choose and Become interview series. You could find this episode and others at trishkendall.com. Just go to trishkendall.com/choose-become-interview-series. Or if you have a question or just want to leave a comment, email me, trish@trishkendall.com.